If your days keep falling apart before it even starts, then it may not be because you lack discipline. It's very likely because you're starting your mornings the wrong way. Hi, my name is Tess. I'm building a digital business while working full-time, being a wife, being a mom, and trying to stay consistent without constantly restarting. I keep forgetting where the camera is. I have to keep remembering to look here. This week I noticed something that explains a lot, and if I'm being honest, it was very uncomfortable to realize this thing about myself. So let me give you a little bit of a background. Typically I read books. That's my comfort, that's my way of comforting myself. It's my way of unwinding. It's calling up with a book. And because I read a lot, I consume different types of books. I read fiction, I read business, and I read about history because conversation for another day. At any given time, I'm juggling 3 different books, one in each of these categories, and I'll be at different progress levels in all 3. So I might open each book once a day at least. And I would typically be reading them at different times of the day depending on what I'm doing, because some of them requires different concentration levels. Also, when I read books, I also listen. Like 80 to 90% of the time I'm reading a book, I'm listening to it, because multitasking is something I do. Like I said, I'm building a business. I have my 9 to 5. I'm a wife and I'm a mom. I wake up in the morning, I'm in the kitchen, getting everybody ready for school or work, trying to throw breakfast together, and I'm plugging a book in my ears. I'm listening to it. I'm going to work on the journey. On the journey, I'm listening to a book. I'm taking a bath. I'm listening to a book. I'm usually plugged in. If I'm not discussing something with my husband or having a conversation with somebody, I'm rarely lonely in my head. I'm listening to a book. If I'm not figuring something out or thinking about something or internalizing something, like what I spoke about in my last video. So if I'm not thinking about something or talking to someone, typically I'll be listening to a book. So that's how I do it. So when I start my day with my fiction books, with listening to my fiction books, it's a miracle if I'm able to unplug from that and achieve anything for the whole day, because it just appears like building my business and the tasks I have set out for myself to achieve by the end of the day, everything literally goes out the window. And this is easy to understand because when I'm reading a fiction book, it's difficult for me to unplug mid-scene, in the middle of action, because I typically would be reading a very captivating, thought-provoking book. Usually, because the books are so engaging, sorry I'm sounding this way, I'm trying not to go into a coughing fit. And so usually it's difficult for me to unplug, and I just keep telling myself, well, nobody's forcing me to stop. I might just as well finish the book because, hey, it's a very captivating story. I'm not starting my day with a fiction book, but I start instead with a business book. I find myself itching to go implement whatever it is that I'm reading, because when I'm picking a business book, it would usually be something that would address something that I'm struggling with in my business at that time. So if, for example, I'm reading a book that's supposed to help me stop procrastination, by the point or by the time I'm listening to that book in the morning while doing my morning chores, I find myself itching to go implement 1 or 2 things I've picked up from listening to the book that morning. It's easier for me to hit pause, think about what I've listened to that morning, and then be like, okay, you know what, I'm just going to go right ahead and jump in on implementing this one thing that I learned this morning. Same thing when I'm reading a history book. Now, this is not something as captivating as the fiction, and but unlike the business book, there's not really anything for me to implement. But because it's not as captivating as the fiction books, it's still easy for me to unplug and go back to what I'm supposed to be doing. The only thing I have found that helps, that derails me from my daily tasks, is the fiction books. If I think about it, the history books should also be derailing me, because I kid you not, I can spend 2 hours straight on YouTube watching the formation of the earth or life on earth, or the first men that walked on earth. But it is what it is. I don't know, maybe because I know that there is an endless supply of those types of videos to watch or those types of books to read. They're not going anywhere. I could easily hit pause and come back. But for the fiction, for some reason, up here I tell myself, You have to finish this story right now because it's just too good. When I noticed this thing happening, I tested it. For some days, I told myself, first thing in the morning, no fiction, no history. Just plug in with a business book. And the difference was ridiculous. And when I say ridiculous, I mean it was amazing. Because on those days, I found myself so focused on what I had to do for the day. By 11, 12, latest 1 p.m., I am completely done. I am completely done with my business tasks I've set for myself for that day, depending on how busy I am. My full-time 9 to 5, I don't get to go every day. So there are some days I get some downtime during the week. And if I do this thing on one of those downtimes, I'm usually very productive. So I've found that this is not something I have read or heard or something. This is something I have thought about, noticed in myself, and implemented. When I begin my days with those business books or something that builds my mind or feeds my mind, it just puts me in that frame of mind that helps me to execute better. So that's when I realized that discipline was not my only problem, or not necessarily my problem. The major problem was the patterns of how I start my day, the series of events that took place at the beginning of my day. That was like the major problem that I discovered that I have. And this is something I want everybody to think about, because I know that this is very likely going to resonate with some of you. A lot of people try to fix consistency, trying to force something that doesn't feel natural, whereas there are things that they are doing that are physically making it difficult or sometimes even impossible for them to achieve or do what they say they are going to do. So when you find these patterns, when you find these things in your activities or in your life that are causing you to reduce the frequency of to reduce the likelihood of you doing what you say you're going to do, or what you've set out to do, or how you achieve your goals, when you've noticed these patterns that are keeping you from them, it's a no-brainer to just stay away from those patterns. Throw it out the window. I've said something like this sometime in the past, but when you notice these things, it just makes sense to stay away from them as much as you can. As a sequel to what I spoke about last week in thinking about things for yourself rather than just regurgitating, think about what I've said today. Be introspective. Look at your daily processes. Look at the things that leads up to your procrastination. Look at the things that leads up to you staying away from the tasks that are going to help you to achieve your goals and shorten the distance between where you are now and where you are going. Be honest with yourself and look at your day. When you identify these patterns, help yourself by staying away from them so that you can increase your chances of sticking to your plans long enough to see results. If you need help figuring out your own patterns that cause you to stay away from your goals and cause a restart cycle, check out my Execution Loop Audit, which is going to help you to figure out these patterns, identify them, and stay away from them. It will help you see exactly where you're stalling. So what to do with this information? Like I said, be introspective and think about it. Once you identify these patterns, you can't ignore them. If you ignore them, then the exercise becomes fruitless. So when you know, you have to make the choice to stay away from them so that it allows you to be more consistent, so that it allows you to be the kind of person who executes better. I hope this helps you as much as it helped me. And that's all for now from me. Bye.